This podcast is brought to you by Craft Spirits and Distilling for those who make and drink great spirits. Join our free email newsletter for technical and creative distilling stories in your inbox every week. Learn more at spiritsanddistilling.com.
Hello, welcome to the Craft Spirits and Distilling Podcast. I'm your host, Mollly Troupe, and today with me is Krogstad. G&D Chillers understands that each distillery's chilling requirements are unique. On every distillery project, G&D offers the front-end design and engineering your team needs at no cost to you. Rebecca Harris, president and head distiller of Catoctin Creek Distillery, recently shared, "Service after the sale is what really separates the quality of a supplier relationship. G&D Chillers has always been a phone call away when we needed them. For a small business like mine, that partnership makes all the difference. Whether you distill batch by batch or in a continuous operation, for more than 30 years, G&D has had the proven solution. Visit them today at gndchillers.com. And for over 11 years, ABS Commercial has been your full-service equipment manufacturer, designing quality distillation equipment ranging from 50 liters to 5,000 liters. Whether establishing a new distillery or expanding into a brew distillery, their team of experienced engineers and designers work with you to develop customized distilling solutions. With their consultative approach, they tailor to your production capacity, space constraints, and budgetary considerations to help you create quality crafted spirits. Contact them today at sales@abs-commercial.com to discuss your customized distilling needs. Christian, if you would tell me a little bit about your story and how you got started in this industry.
It's a short story of a long period. I grew up in Seattle in the 80s, really witnessing the renaissance of the craft beer movement. Got really interested in beer and brewing, started home brewing when I got into college in, say, 85. Homebrewed, really enjoyed it, did pretty well at it, but at the same time, I wasn't really doing any, I didn't have a career per se or a direction I was going in. And then in 1990, end of 90, early 91, I decided that I really loved homebrewing and wanted to get into brewing professionally. So I moved to Portland, which at the time, had more breweries than anywhere. I think there were like 14 breweries in Portland at the time, which was huge. Yeah. And so I moved down and started knocking on doors and got an apprenticeship right away into McMenamins and brewed for the next 12 years, I guess. I went to brewing school in Chicago during that time, and then opened a place up in Bellingham, and then moved back to Portland. And my final job was managing in brewing was managing the Edgefield Brewery out in Troutdale, which is sort of I don't know if you haven't been there. It's a fabulous grounds. It's an old county poor farm that's been converted into a brewery, winery, and they had just added a distillery. And so I got to hang out up there at the distillery and see what was involved. And I just thought, oh, damn, I can do this. So so it was kind of the next phase for me was spirits. I after 12 years of brewing, I'd always really liked cocktails because it's, liquid cooking. I'd always liked whiskey because, beer just wants to be whiskey. And so a friend of mine who is the distiller at Edgefield and I hatched a plan, and this is in 2002. And we started working on our own distillery, got actually into business in 2004.
Wow.
Started selling, I think, August 27th of 2004 was our date of first sale. And that's that. That's how we launched House Spirits Distillery. So that's, 20 years ago.
That's amazing. not easy to start a distillery, and especially when the craft scene was so new at that time. I'm sure there's so many stories you could talk about, the problems of going first, really, and all the problems you had to solve that maybe didn't have answers at the time. Was it interesting kind of trying to get this off the ground when it just was unfamiliar territory?
Yeah, there were a couple things. Yeah, there weren't a lot of, examples, but there were some that were, pretty relevant. Think, St. George Spirits was interesting what they had done. And Clear Creek, obviously, was another right here in Portland. So, I think there were only maybe 30, 35 distilleries, what we would call craft distilleries around the country. But that was enough to kind of get some ideas about the breadth of the industry. But at the same time, there were, for instance, when we went to the ATF to get our license, they were accustomed to dealing with large companies who had, teams of lawyers working on their applications. So it was kind of a mismatch in style or size. And the other thing that happened during that time was they would just pass Congress had just passed created the Department of Homeland Security.
Yes, yeah.
And split up the ATF, and the agents with guns went to Homeland Security, and the agents with calculators stayed at Treasury as the new TTB or ATTTB. And so there was a lot of chaos. Yeah. Nobody knew.
Bureaucratic confusion.
So it kind of caused a little bit of paralysis. We put in our application, and, we had been told that it usually, takes about, I think they were telling us, 10 weeks to really get a good initial review on an application. And we put it in, and then, 10 weeks to the day later, I called them up and managed to find the person on whose desk the application had landed. And they told me that they weren't processing new applications.
Oh, gosh.
So just because they didn't know who was supposed to do what. So things like that, there's always going to be hurdles like that, but
maybe a little bit more unique to the time. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's amazing how relatable, just dealing with that stuff still is. Everyone kind of has their own experience. I think it's also fascinating to talk about from a city level, just the complexity. I mean, you guys, were you the first in Portland?
No, New Deal started up before us.
And I guess
Portland.
Clear Creek was in Portland.
Yeah,
at that
Clear
time.
Creek. Yeah. Clear Creek was in Portland. New Deal had started up. We had started up in Corvallis initially. We really how we started was we bought an existing facility, and that streamlined it quite a bit.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we bought the original Ransom distillery from Tad Seastead, and it was down in Corvallis. And so we part of that was we set up an alternating proprietorship so that he could continue to work in it. And as far as I know, that was the first distillery alt prop. A lot of the TTB folks didn't even know that was possible.
That's amazing. And now, I mean, it's a very common industry thing to do. It's helpful for people, getting started and who don't want to have something outright. But I mean, this is like hearing about all the legendary distilleries who were old in Portland and how they got their start. I feel like the thing that is unique about Portland distilling is it's a very pay it forward kind of industry. We're all very trying to help each other, which is pretty. Yeah. I don't know if it's unique, but it feels very great to be a part of. Well,
yeah, and I think that's we had as an example the Willamette Valley winery industry and the the Portland brewing industry, both of which, were very collaborative and, unlike some others, some wine regions, they're very, secretive and competitive, or jealous, say, and same with beer. But you see the same sort of collegiality in the wine industry around here and in brewing. So it was natural that the distilling industry would follow in that.
Totally. So let's dive in a little bit more to house spirits. When you guys first started, was it your intention to be a not branded house, or how did that evolve?
Yeah, it was, good question.
There's always an evolution.
That was 20 years ago. Yeah, no, we did, it was intended to be we did kind of both. So we'd have a sort of the house label, the house spirits. We had sort of an apothecary bottle and label and design, and that's what we would release experiments or beta testing, and so that we already had a label, and so we just changed a few words. It was almost like a generic label, but it looked cool, and it kind of looked it looked like a lab sample, but at the same time we knew that anything that we wanted to get out into distribution should have its own personality, its own identity. That's the way we wanted to do it, just because then we could have fun with some products, and others, would have their own, we could have a serious product, we could have a fun product. Just looking around at spirits producers in the market, we realized that, in beer and wine, people tend to drink breweries and wineries. And by that, I mean that, if you go into a restaurant and you're looking for a glass of wine, you tend to gravitate towards a winery that you have good feelings towards. And if they don't have their Chardonnay, you might order their Sauvignon Blanc instead, just because the winery and you trust it, whatever, you have good feelings towards it. Whereas in spirits, people tend to drink categories. So, they are a bourbon drinker, for instance. And so if their favorite bourbon or the bourbon that they're looking for isn't on the list, then they'll try some other bourbon. They won't try the rye from the same producer, Mm-hmm. So that was part of the realization, is that I think we felt like that people in spirits drink categories.
Mm-hmm. What was your guys' first product that you launched?
We did a couple things. We, of our own, we launched the Medoya vodka. Mm-hmm. So it was a, rectified, filtered NGS vodka. It got us out on the market and gave us a lot of practice with distribution and marketing and so forth. And my former partner still makes it today. It's still out there.
Wow. That's very cool.
20 years later.
Very cool.
Yeah. So we made that, we got that launched in, like I said, August of 2004. We also did some contract manufacturing for, I don't know if you've heard of Indio Spirits. Mm-hmm. I think they changed the name. I think they still have an Indio brand, but the name of the distillery's changed. And so we did contract manufacturing for them for quite a few years, and for some other folks as well.
Oh, very cool. I think Is Indio now Portland Distilling?
Yeah, I think that's what they're called. Rose City.
Oh,
Portland.
Rose City. Yes. Yeah. And so when you started with a vodka, which is, a very similar story to people starting, it requires no aging, so it's a little bit quicker. Eventually you also released a gin. What was the timeline for like your gin and your whiskeys and really all the other products that you've made?
Yeah, so we launched the vodka in August of 2004. We started working on the gin really right away and doing a number of different, experiments, but we didn't actually bottle it until March of 2006, I think is when we first, March, I'm looking at the old records, March 21st of 2006. So about a year and a half after after we launched the vodka, we got Aviation. We launched Aviation, and that, part of that is it took, at least 6 months of trials and development to get it to where we wanted it.
We're going to take a quick break. If you're planning a distillery or brewery launch, adding a distillery to your brewery, or considering purchasing an existing brewing or distilling business, then visit breweryworkshop.com for more information about the Brewery and Distillery Workshop, brought to you by Craft Spirits and Distilling and Craft Beer and Brewing. Over 4 days, you'll learn what it takes to get a successful craft beverage business off the ground through panel discussions, working group sessions, technical tours, and more. Get your ticket now at breweryworkshop.com. Let's dive back into Aviation. So year and a half after you launched your first product, you came out with Aviation. Let's talk about how it came to be.
Yeah, this is a fun. It's a great organic story, and we did not design the brand. We designed the product, and then let the brand kind of flow from that. So, and that's, I think that's true of really, just about everything we've done is, we're production people. At heart, I'm more passionate about the product and the production side than on the branding, but they're equally important if for a commercial venture. And, once we launched the Medoyev vodka and got that out and into distribution and, worked on growing that, then, we were able to start, working on some of the more sort of, passionate projects. And the first being gin. And, we were distilling some whiskey at the same time. We were fermenting or mashing at a neighboring brew pub and fermenting it at our place and distilling it. But that's, much longer range project. The next, once we got the vodka launched, we started playing with other products, especially gin. Initially we were looking at doing seasonal gins, just with the realization that, people drink gin differently in summer versus winter. And so, we had developed, some prototypes for a summer gin. It was very bright. It was very, I would describe it as green. It was green. And a winter gin that, if you're getting into the sort of the synesthesia of these things, they have colors.
Right.
The winter was brown and the summer was green. And, the summer used more fresh botanicals, and the winter used more dried and so forth, earthy. Anyway, as we produced these, our smallest still was 65 gallons, something like that. So we get a fair quantity, and we would bottle some up and for for marketing, marketing samples, kind of bring a couple of these out and have people try them. and get reaction. And one of them, one of those experiments ended up at an event in Seattle, like a bartender event. And Ryan McGarrion was there. He was a bartender originally from Portland, but he was working in Seattle at the time, working for the Kathy Casey Food Studios, which is a food and beverage consultancy. And he was really taken by it, not especially taken by the fact that you could that a couple kids in Portland were playing around with gin. And so he looked us up, came down, gave me quite an education on, the history of American cocktails and sort of especially the pre-Prohibition American cocktail.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided to join forces, and he helped with the development and especially from the perspective of how is gin used in a cocktail. And so that really helped guide the development from there.
Yeah. So what was his advice as you continued to make that dive?
Well, a lot of it had to do with, like I said, how gin is used in cocktails and how it integrates with other flavors. And so we would, with each iteration or each trial batch, we would make the same sort of benchmark cocktails. But we were really doing it. We were looking at, old cocktail recipes. And so we were trying to essentially, recreate pre-Prohibition American gin, right? Because there's no recipes for pre-Prohibition American gin. And, when these places shut down, they shut down for good in, 1920 or whatever. And so the way that we felt like we could kind of recreate that style was by making the best gin that we could for the cocktail recipes of the time. And so that's kind of how we backed into it.
So that's your intent with your creation. How did your botanical selection kind of lend to that?
Well, there were a couple things we realized. One is that it must have been pre-Prohibition American gins must have been lower in juniper than a London Dry. And that makes sense because cost of shipping was a much greater part of the product cost back then. They didn't have, intermodal transportation and so forth. And so it makes sense that they wouldn't have been using so much, firmly believed from our, various histories with food and beverage was that, neither one of us were interested in making something that was, a strident, flavor that, we didn't want to make, I never wanted to make the hoppiest beer or the bitterest beer or the, spiciest food or whatever. I like to have balance. I like to have a lot of flavor. But I like it to be balanced, mouth pleasing, not fatiguing and so forth. And so in selecting botanicals, we just kind of whiteboarded it initially. We started listing off botanicals that we would consider using and sort of put them on a matrix on where does this fall? Is it herbal? Is it floral? Is it citrus? And so initially it was just sort of a flavor memory experiment, and then we started grabbing some of these and combining them into test batches. And it took about 35 iterations. I have to admit, it wasn't a very scientific process. It was very much trial and error. But some of the flavors were, so I would say, typical gin ingredients like juniper, obviously, and coriander and orange peel and anise seed. But then some of them were, at the time fairly unusual, like green cardamom and lavender.
Mm-hmm.
And then ultimately sarsaparilla, which was the final ingredient that kind of brought it all together.
And do you think that any of these ingredients ended up being like the one key ingredient for success for the recipe, or was it more of the balance or harmony you were speaking of?
I think it's more of the balance and the harmony. I think that the sarsaparilla kind of ended up being the kind of secret weapon. It was the final, like I said, it was the final ingredient we added, and it was up until that point we loved the flavor, we loved the aroma, loved the finish, but it was sort of a little bit flat on the mid palate, and so we wanted to add some sort of phenolic or oily or something a little more textural. And so to me that meant some sort of like I said, phenolic compound or whatnot. Vanilla could have filled the bill, but I didn't want to do something that mundane. And we kind of came across the sarsaparilla, tried that, and that really I guess I would say it's the one ingredient that's the hardest to spot in aviation.
Mm-hmm.
If you spend a little time with a glass of it, you can pick up the juniper, obviously, and the orange peel, and every other ingredient, and usually sarsaparilla is kind of the last one you come to.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people aren't very familiar with sarsaparilla. Do you want to talk about what it's commonly seen in?
Yeah, I mean, it's used in like root beer or
mm-hmm.
various root beverages like that. But my exposure came from when I was a kid. My father used to smoke a pipe occasionally, and some of the pipe tobaccos and the pipe tobacco he favored had a little bit of sarsaparilla mixed into it. And so I had this, from my earliest memories, this kind of fondness for sarsaparilla from that. But it's definitely, we would recognize it as, sort of root beer.
Mm-hmm. So is this, sometimes, creators of recipes, flavor memory is a really difficult thing to communicate to others because sometimes they're very specific, but this is like one of your flavor memories that you were able to successfully incorporate into a big recipe.
Yeah, there were a couple things like that. It was the same with the green cardamom. My family's Scandinavian, Norwegian American, and in most Scandinavian households around the holidays, there are some very special Christmas cookies and Christmas breads that use green cardamom, and so I had that. Again, that was another flavor memory, and that's largely why I wanted to use cardamom in the recipe to start with. It's like because I did have this fond childhood memory of it.
Oh yes, and I think once you discover cardamom, there's like no going back. It's a beautiful ingredient.
Yeah, it's easy to overdo.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty flavor intensive, and I think it's easy to fall into that, if a little is good, a lot must be great kind of trap.
And it is kind of one of those ingredients too. I think another one that you have in there that can be overwhelming is lavender, but cardamom and lavender work really well together. Yeah.
I again, very unscientifically, had no idea. But just got, well, as with a lot of these things, luck was key.
Right. And I like to say, the difference between like science and fucking around is writing it down. So if you guys were taking notes, you were doing science.
Yeah. We were writing it down so that we could, that would be a tragedy to this happens in bartending all the time. Somebody
right.
comes up with a great new drink, but they didn't write down like what the proportions were. So they have to spend the next 2 days trying every iteration to get it right.
Yeah, it is devastating when that happens. And that, in the lab, that's the last thing you want to deal with.
Yeah, this is great. What did I do? Right. How did I do that?
Why can't I remember? Because we never do.
Exactly.
We never do. So you had this beautiful product. You launched it, and it's been, what was that? 18 years. So it's evolved a lot in that time. And not maybe the recipe itself, but in terms of, I know you guys did a repackaging, a rebranding for it.
The last time we changed the recipe was, fall of 2006. So we had gotten it out there and it was a little bit heavy in the cardamom. And so we backed off a little bit. And that was an interesting, I think that it took 6 months to realize it because, gin changes after bottling. Gin changes constantly, and different essential oils change at different rates. And we found that, when it was, fresh distilled or within a couple weeks of distilling it, it was great. But then as time went by, a couple months later, when everything kind of settled down, the cardamom was still, prominent. So we backed that off a little bit. But yeah, the initial, we did everything. We started up the distillery, very much on a bootstrap. It was a bootstrap operation on a shoestring. There we go. I think we had $65,000 or something like that to get started. And that got us into business. And, but we didn't have a lot of money for any of it, really, for packaging. So when we designed the label for the Aviation, we went to a sort of a startup design firm and traded them 20 cases of gin for the label art. And so, we were doing everything we could to preserve cash and to spend less of our hard-earned money. And so we went with Bordeaux bottle, it's straight-sided flint, clear glass, Stelvin, screw cap. We did that not just for ease of packaging, but also for ease of use. We wanted a package that would be bartender friendly. So something that would fit in the well nicely, something that, had a nice long neck that you could grab. It was the right size to take a pour spout, opened easily, all those things. We were really designing it to be an on-premise, a bar product more than a liquor store product. Mm-hmm. But yeah, and that is how we built the brand, was really on-premise, using a lot of Ryan's, initially using Ryan's connections in the bar world, and then me just going out with our distributor and going to bars and I think Anheuser-Busch had proven that that's the right way to build a brand. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of followed in those footsteps.
Gotcha.
We put all of our effort into getting the gatekeepers, the bartenders, to use it and to talk about it and to evangelize about it, and just trusted that eventually the off-premise, the grocery store or the liquor store sales would follow.
Mm-hmm. At what point were you guys able to make that? Because doing custom bottles, doing any of that is a big investment.
Yeah, that happened in 2012. So, that was 6 years later, 6 years after we launched it. I had in 2011, I brought in new investors, partners. I went from, at that point, I was the sole owner of House Spirits. But then, and Ryan McGarrion was a partner in the Aviation Gin brand. And in 2011, we brought in new partners, new investors, and the capital that they brought along. And part of that was to rebrand, design a bottle that would then appeal to the liquor store or assist with liquor store sales. The original bottle, didn't really jump off the shelf. It didn't, it didn't help itself sell in liquor stores. So primarily the people who were buying it were people who had tried it at a bar and, came looking for it. That it was going to be an impediment to sales growth in the future. So we worked with Sandstrom Design Partners here in Portland. They've done some great work. They did the Saint Germain bottle, and they did the Bullet and a Tazo tea and so forth. So they've got some really great wins, some great examples of work in the past. And they're local. So that was a natural fit for us.
Mm-hmm. And so you launched this repackaged product like you said, in 2012. And I mean, this bottle is iconic. And did it do what you intended it to do?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We went from being, 60% on premise to being, 60% off premise, not because we lost on premise sales, but because we gained off premise. So it really helped. It helped with the, liquor store sales, all of the, off premise stuff. And it also helped people gain some confidence in it that, it was a legit brand, I guess. So yeah, and then it continued to grow over the next several years until we sold it to Blake Lively's husband back in 2016.
Wait, he didn't come up with the recipe?
Well, I mean, I'm sure he had some influence on it. No, I mean,
you were always thinking of him.
Yeah, exactly. We were anticipating what he would like, and he was channeling that through this. Yeah, no. So that's kind of been the trajectory, and it was a group. He was part of the group that bought the brand in 2016, along with our. We had a third party, a sales agent called Davos Brands, and they had a sales team and a number of products that they represented. So we didn't have our own sales organization. It's pretty expensive to field a national sales organization, especially if you only have we only had the one brand at the time that was really a national brand that had national potential. So we subscribed to the Davos sales agency, and then at some point, I think they decided that it had potential, and they made us an offer for the brand, and we sold it to them. And really, the only thing that changed was that they were then responsible for the marketing. Before the sale, they did the sales, we did the marketing and production. After the sale, they did the marketing. We still did the production. So we produced it for another 5 years.
And now they have their own small facility in Portland where they do the production. Yeah,
they've got a place in Northwest Portland that they started working on, I think maybe in 2018, and really just got it fully up and running about a year ago, maybe a year and a half. and it's a, pretty sizable facility. They've got a couple 3,000 gallon stills.
Oof.
And so their capacity there is, millions of cases. So I don't think they're going to need to move anytime soon.
Well, hopefully not. It took them so long to build that one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, it's a beautiful facility. They are, taking it international and growing it. And it's been fun seeing that, even though I don't own the brand anymore, it's still, emotionally, it's still mine. And in fact, I help out a little bit with that. They've brought me back in to kind of help tell the story a little.
I think, understated in our industry is how, this recipe is made of your own personal sensory experiences. So, kind of selling it off is also emotional. And then to be able to come back and talk about it though, has that been really rewarding?
Yeah, no, super fun. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's a big ego boost too, to be recognized that way. But it's also, it's been fun to, they're sort of asking me to go back 18 years and to think about, what was my mindset and what were we doing and what were some of the original cocktails we were making with it, and so forth. It's been really fun.
That's great. And, just another, ego boost too. You have the Aviation brand that has tremendous success. And then you also have Westward whiskey, another success story as well. We can talk about that a little bit, but I'd love to talk to you more too about aquavit.
Oh yeah, let's. So yeah, aquavit. A lot of people. I imagine most of the people listening to the podcast will know what that is, but a lot of people outside of that, I would say most people in the U.S. have never heard of it, have no idea what aquavit is. But it's it's this traditional Scandinavian spirit. It's produced in originally produced in Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, and then more recently in Iceland. But it's traditional to those countries. It's flavored with, it's essentially a caraway or dill seed gin, botanical spirit. So it has to have either caraway or dill seed, or it can have both. And beyond that, it's really wide open. Just like gin doesn't say what other ingredients you can use, neither does aquavit. But there's some traditions, but it's really, seen a tremendous amount of innovation in the last 20 years, the category. It's something that, if you're Scandinavian American, you're probably exposed to growing up. It was another holiday thing. We see a big spike in sales around the holidays because, people are going out. Scandinavian Americans are going out to get their bottle for the, Christmas dinner or whatever. And that's how I was exposed to it. We would always have it around the holidays, and coming up to Christmas in 2006, there wasn't any on the market. At that point, there were no domestic aquavits, and there were really only 3 that had been imported to the U.S. There was the Linja from Norway, the O.P. Anderson from Sweden, and Aalborg from Denmark. But O.P. Anderson had pulled out of the market for some reason. They were out of the market for maybe 6 or 8 years, and the Norwegian company, Linja, had just purchased Aalborg, the Danish company, and realigned its distribution. So that often causes, supply problems. And also at the same time, for some reason, Linja was out of stock. I think maybe they probably had a container held up in, customs somewhere. And so here we were in, November of 2006, and the Oregon and Washington liquor stores, they were both control states, had no aquavit. And I panicked, and so we thought, well, what the heck? We've got a still. We can make some aquavit, but even then we weren't planning on it being a commercial endeavor. We just wanted to make some, have a little bit in the distillery to try with some pickled herring or whatever. And so we made a batch and didn't really think much about it. But every time a bartender or journalist would visit us, we'd always kind of bring out our experiments, our Slivovitz or our beer schnapps or our aquavit, and really captivated a lot of people. And they'd say, enough of them said that they would buy it if we would bottle it, that we took them off on that and kind of created the brand.
Wow.
Again, we did it, very much on a budget, very inexpensive design, label design, and but striking. I really liked the label on it. Just sort of proof that you don't always have to spend big money for great art.
Right.
But so we bottled it up and got it out into distribution. And again, it's such a small category. We've never pushed it, never put much money or effort behind it. But it is near and dear to my heart. So that's the one brand that I still own 100%. My wife and I are own that. We produce it at Westward Whiskey. Under contract, and we distribute it, throughout the country, online and so forth. So it's available, but it's not, we're not putting out ads, and we're not, doing.
It's one of those that the cool kids know about it.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it. The sort of the cool kid bartenders, especially, you go to, it's on the drinks menu at, Death and Co. or a variety of great cocktail spots around the country. It's definitely well known in the sort of the top tier of bars, but it's not on the back bar at Applebee's, for instance.
It might not be appreciated the way you want it to be at Applebee's. But.
Well, I mean, although I would say it makes a spectacular Bloody Mary. And just about everybody makes a Bloody Mary. So
yes, that's true.
So it could be ubiquitous.
I was going to ask, one of the things I love about Geneva is the kind of ritual with drinking it, right? It's a full tulip glass. You have to take a sip before you move it. Is there a similar method or similar kind of traditional way?
There are, again, it's little glasses, typically like half ounce or smaller, and they call them snaps. And this is one thing that's caused a lot of confusion. The reason that you go into almost any liquor store in the country, and they will have the aquavit, if they have it at all. It'll be next to the liqueurs, because they're thinking schnapps.
Right.
Because especially the Swedish term is snap. It's a snap. You take this little snaps, a little chilled shot, typically with food. And so that is the tradition. There's no, and there are drinking songs,
of course.
but other than that, yeah, that's really the tradition, is that it's usually, consumed neat, chilled in little tiny glasses, with food. There's
no pickled herring back or anything like that.
Oh, yes, there is.
Ooh.
But it's often drunk with pickled herring or smoked cod roe or some of these more very flavorful fish oils and so forth. It's very aquavit is a great, especially caraway, aquavit is a great palate cleanser.
Right.
And so that's how it's often consumed.
I would imagine Icelandic might do it with fermented whale.
Yeah, I wouldn't know.
It would probably make fermented whale taste better, I imagine.
Yeah, I don't know if anything could. Some of the flavors are a bit much, even for me. You really have to grow up with them. Some of the, fermented seal blubber, or I'm a little old to try it now, I think.
I mean, I don't think I could do it. I don't think I could. I mean, maybe if I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And then, anything once, I guess.
Sure.
So, and now there's like aquavit's kind of picking up. There's a whole aquavit week in the United States, correct?
Yeah. So Portland's journalist and bartender named Jake Greer started up Aquavit Week about, I think it's maybe 8-9 years ago. Kind of patterned after Negroni Week, but which is also another Portland invention. He has a website. Check it out. aquavitweek.com, and each year, he tries to build the profile of aquavit, get bars to run aquavit specials for the week. We always have a kickoff event in Portland, usually at Broder on Killingsworth there, where we kick it off, and then have various events during the week. So this year, Aquavit Week is in the second week in August, and we're doing a couple things. Mostly, we're going to focus events in Seattle and Portland. And we're doing, besides the kickoff at Broder, we're doing a Krogstad, which is a traditional Swedish summer crawfish boil.
Ooh.
It's a big thing in Sweden. Typically, they do it the first week of August. We're doing it the second week of August. I think maybe we had a sense that crawfish availability would be better then, but. So we're doing that with a lot in collaboration with Turnant PDX, which is a Oregon catering and restaurants group. They do some great live fire cooking. And then a couple events up in Seattle. I don't think they've been nailed down yet, so I don't think he's quite ready to announce those, but it's coming together. So if you're interested in aquavit, that's a great way to kind of participate and see what's new. But yeah, I mean, when we launched, so we launched it in 2007, the Krogstad aquavit. So it's named after my family. And as far as I know, we were the first distilled aquavit outside of Scandinavia. There was a infused, macerated aquavit from Chicago that started around the same time. They might have opened up a little before us, but they weren't distilling. It was caraway soaked in NGS, and I think it was pretty good. It just wasn't distilled, called North Shore. But both of us started around the same time, 2007, 2006. And now there are, I think at last count, maybe 90 different aquavits being produced in the U.S. So it's definitely taken off.
Wow, yeah. So you manage your Krogstad Aquavit brand. What else are you up to in the industry these days?
I'm doing so I left the House Spirits, the distillery I started in 2002. I left there in about almost 2 years ago. I stayed on, after I brought in new partners. I moved into the minority ownership, but stayed working there until oh gosh, what is that? Another 10 years. And then I left 2 years ago to focus on Krogstad Akavit. But also we had just bought a farm. So doing a lot of farming. That's a lot of work.
Yes. Full-time job.
Yeah. And then my other full-time jobs are in consulting. I'm working on I'm helping a couple different companies with different projects. So I'm working on a distillery startup down in Texas, helping a Irish company called Cobblestone Brands with a gin called Four Corners Gin, which we launched about, oh gosh, it's been almost a year now. And it's a, American dry gin. Really, it's intended to be it is the great American road trip in a bottle. So it's botanicals from all over the U.S.
That sounds wonderful.
It is. Doing a little consulting for, like I said, Aviation Gin, which has been really fun and gratifying, and a couple other projects here and there. So it's keeping me busy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that sounds like a lot of fun too. Just kind of helping people get started, seeing brands grow. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's fun, and it's also. I learn a lot doing it. I've always felt like teaching is a great way to learn, and so it puts together a lot of my experience. I get to tap a lot of the things, my hard-earned lessons over the years, and help other people with that, and it kind of helps me too to realize how far I've come. So
right. It's pretty unique having 20 plus years of just distilling experience plus your brewing experience. That's a lot of lessons that you've learned, I'm sure, the hard way, that you can share a lot of wisdom.
Yeah. Hopefully I don't have too many more hard learned lessons to go. But yeah, exactly. I think it's fun to be able to. It's fun, gratifying, satisfying to be able to kind of share some of that and help people avoid some of those mistakes.
Well, yeah, because there are a lot of mistakes you can make.
Oh, and they're inventing new ones all the time.
What? Oh, yeah. That they are. Well, it's been so wonderful having you today. Thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, of course. I had a really fun time. Thanks for inviting me on and taking this stroll down memory lane.
It's been great.
Thanks a lot.
Of course. For more than 30 years, G&D Chillers has had the proven solution for distilleries. Visit them today at gdchillers.com. Whether establishing a new distillery or expanding into a brewstillery, ABS Commercial is your full-service equipment manufacturer for equipment ranging from 50 liters to 5,000 liters. Visit breweryworkshop.com to secure your ticket to this September's Brewery and Distillery Workshop. If you've enjoyed this podcast, go to spiritsanddistilling.com and sign up for our free newsletter featuring new stories every week from some of the best writers and distillers in the distilling world. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another in-depth distilling conversation for you. Thanks for joining us. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Spirits and Distilling for those who love to make and drink great spirits. Join our free newsletter today at spiritsanddistilling.com for pragmatic, technical, and creative distilling stories in your inbox every week. Sign up now at spiritsanddistilling.com or click on the link in the show notes.